So I'm president of the Recording Academy. For those of you who have not heard the Recording Academy, I'm sure they heard of the GRAMMY Awards, which is, I would say, the most renowned product of what we do. But ultimately, we're a membership organization of 24,000 of the world's top creators. Anybody who's ever gotten a Grammy is a member of the Academy. And part of my personal focus was ultimately is reinventing the Academy for a very different century than the one that it came from. And ultimately, even the show is a byproduct of a broadcast era, which is quickly migrating to a digital era, right? So Web3, ultimately the way that it will impact the way that our members make money, make their living, connect with their fans, create opportunities, that's a major focus of ours.
When the whole kind of streaming era happened, and everything sort of turned into a streaming model, Web3 kind of hadn't landed at that point. It hadn't sort of evolved into what could sort of solve the issue with in terms of artists getting what's owed to them. When did you first raise an eyebrow to that and go, actually, hang on, there's something here?
So I am what most people will call an early internet entrepreneur. I founded a company in 2000, a company called Sonic Bids. I was the first platform that became a de facto standard for connecting bands with music promoters, and I think that informed a lot of my journey. So I guess you can say I was part of probably what most people would call the Web 1.0 into Web 2.0. And then after I sold my company in 2013, I went to Berklee College of Music, which is the world's largest school for contemporary music, and I led its expansion globally. But it was through my work at Berklee that I started becoming aware of the fact that hundreds of millions of dollars were being collected by different organizations, but identifying where to send that money was extremely difficult. And there was a number of reasons, there still are a number of reasons for that, most of them because of technological shortcomings, especially as we migrated from a physical world where you're selling physical goods into a digital world where information about ownership, information about consumption is often sitting behind closed databases. So in 2016, we published a paper through the institute that I founded at Berklee called the Institute for Creative Entrepreneurship, sort of outlining the issues and effectively calling for the industry to do something a heck of a lot better, especially because at the time, the industry was in a rapid decline. I mean, it had dropped from about $20 billion a year in the late 90s, early 2000s to under 10. Had this been in any other industry, if this was the automotive industry or the farming industry, I think there would have been a federal government intervention in it. So it was through this work that I first got exposure to blockchain and the what I feel are positive implications of the deployment of the underlying technology with respect to tackling a lot of these issues. But then for me, it's beyond just being sort of a defensive technology. Is ultimately something that, in my view, will completely revolutionize and reinvent the way that artists create, collaborate, the way that fans consume, the way that they interact with their favorite artists. And in many ways, it's going to blur the lines between creator and consumer and owner in a way that we haven't seen before.
Have you seen any hesitation from the kind of industry side in terms of labels and record companies as Web3 came to the fore? I know you mentioned that the music industry saw a huge decline and it was trying to work a way out of that. And as everyone was trying to figure out what would come next, Web3's come along. And we're starting to see artists kind of release albums using Web3 through NFTs. And but I'm just curious to find out from your side, have the industry been very pro Web3? Do they still Are they still exploring it? Where are they in that process?
It's been a journey.
Right.
When we first started talking about blockchain in 2016, 17, 18, and I'm also a fellow at MIT Connection Science, which is their foremost data analytics group within the Media Lab. I had many people in the industry actually tell me, stop talking about blockchain.
Really?
If you're going to keep talking about blockchain, we will not be involved in any project that you guys are doing. Because at the time, I think it was synonymous with a lot of the underbelly, if you will, of at least what they perceived to be a fairly nefarious kind of world, right? And it took years, as is often the case, I think, for the industry to come around. My view is that with the rapid sort of migration to digital, but then the subsequent rebound of the industry, it's made the migration to Web3, blockchain, and so forth a heck of a lot more acceptable, and I would say urgent, because the industry's gone from a dollars and industry to effectively an industry where it's all about collecting pennies, right? So the more accurate collections you have, the better off you are. And the technology itself lends itself very well to this, right? But with the mass publicity that NFTs got starting a couple of years ago, I think the industry is also waking up and saying, gee, maybe there's a way for us to recapture something that we thought we lost when we went from physical to digital, and that is the ability to create unique assets in limited quantities, and also do something that was never quite possible in the physical space, which is to ultimately embed code and dictate what happens to any subsequent resales of that particular asset. And my view is that we are at the equivalent of maybe what the mid-90s were to the internet. People see the possibilities, they can kind of glimpse the growth, but we have no idea what's going to happen in the next 10 years. And you're seeing this sort of occurring in all kinds of domains, from what's happening in gaming, what's happening in the metaverse, what's happening with NFTs, what's happening with respect to artists themselves experimenting with the technology in different ways. And we kind of forget that music has always led to catalyzing the adoption of new technologies from the advent of time. If it wasn't for music, radio wouldn't have taken off. If it wasn't for music, TV wouldn't have taken off. Blockchain wouldn't be around if it wasn't for Napster popularizing peer-to-peer sharing and sort of rewiring us in terms of what's possible when you have sort of communities that come together to share data in a way that once was not necessarily, possible. Music catalyzed social networking. The musicians were the first to embrace Friendster, then MySpace, then Facebook. The campaign of I Want My MTV popularized cable. And now I think that musicians are embracing this new technology, and they're in many ways showing the way of where it could go, even in the metaverse. You have people like Lil Nas X experimenting with Roblox, Travis Scott experimenting with Fortnite. And these are early, they're early experiments. But it's through this trial and error that I believe that music and musicians and music communities are showing to the rest of us what's possible. Lastly, everybody's running to subscriptions. You see the proliferation on the TV side and film side of streaming services. Guess who showed the way first? music. So to me, that's what's cool about working in this industry, that if you are aware, you realize that you're not, you're on the front seat of innovation and you can lead the way rather than being sort of this passive bystander or worse, somebody who's negatively affected. In every step along the way, music has shown resilience, starting from what I said, radio, because when radio came about, there was a whole lot of people in the music industry who said, wow, that's gonna rob the money that we're able to make from live music. The same with records. People forget that when records came about, there was a massive pushback, thinking that that will rob musicians from their ability to make a living from touring. But with every subsequent innovation, the industry rebounded, embraced it, and ultimately used it to grow. So if you're in the technology space, I would say if you want to glimpse the future, look at the music industry and what they're adopting.
I love it. It was the same with the cassette tape, and that came out and everyone was doing copies. But what's interesting with Web3 as well is the live aspect, you know, the proof of attendance, the NFT ticketing, the experiential moments that can happen through a live event via Web3. What excites you most about kind of what lies ahead? What are you doing with the academy in that regard?
Oh, this is the best time to be in the music industry. Everything you just mentioned. So for example, just starting on the ticketing side, right? Right now, most artists have absolutely no idea who comes to their shows. And there's almost no way to make a connection between the people that are listening to your music and the people that are actually coming to your show. You can imagine all kinds of cool programs and schemes that can be developed in the future that reward your super fans in ways that is just not possible even right now. And even with respect to the way that money's being distributed from streaming services, I think that you have the possibility to eventually develop models where the money that I'm paying goes directly to the bands that I'm choosing to listen to versus going into a pool and then being distributed according to some algorithm that most of us don't even understand, right? When I was a kid and I walked into a record store and I bought a U2 album or a Bruce Springsteen album, part of what was motivated me was the fact that I felt I am giving money to my favorite artist. That's gone away, which means that there is something that broke between the connection of me as a fan and the artist. It's become almost too clinical. So that's one area that excites me, right? How it will reconstitute the way that fans and artists are connecting with each other, know more about each other, and recreate that relationship that I think has been broken for the last 2 decades. The other area that excites me is the impact that we'll have on the very creation of music. We often look at technologies as sort of mediums of delivery, but we don't often realize that they also have a corresponding impact on the very nature of what's created. So, prior to multi-track recording, people looked at records as purely capturing what was happening in a live environment and just putting it on a medium that just recreated it. With multi-track recording, the Beatles came about and they said, forget all this, records are painting with sound. And we're going to do something that's just not even possible live and can't even be recreated live because it's a totally new medium. What can happen with blockchain in terms of all kinds of creative expressions, or what can happen with Web3 and the metaverse when music is truly immersive, when you can hear music and experience music in a completely different way depending on where you're sitting, depending on how you're moving your head, depending on which adventure you choose, if you will, to go into, right? So we've been so conditioned to listening and experiencing music in a linear way. what happens when we experience music in a 3D environment, or where you can remix or recreate things in a non-linear fashion? You know, can I personalize my own copy of Sgt. Pepper, right? Can I contribute to it and then share it to everybody, but be identified as part of that contribution? So as an academy, we're looking at all kinds of ways that this will, impact our membership and how we can be thought leaders in sort of ushering them into this new era. But also, very importantly, most people forget that, well, we ultimately put out a product with the Grammy Awards that is maybe the most recognizable global brand when it comes to experiencing music in some way. And we like to say that the Grammy Awards are all about providing both a physical and a metaphorical stage for that talent to shine. As we're looking at the impact of our brand, part of what we're doing is expanding what that brand means beyond just a show. I mean, the Academy does work 364 other days a year and 21 and a half hours other than the 3.5 hours that is the broadcast television show. We're looking at all kinds of ways that we can engage fans and help them discover music and help them develop that deeper bond with music by using our brand as a bridge, but ultimately using Web3 technology as a means of creating that connectivity with artists. And as we're looking into new spaces being developed, such as the metaverse, you know, so many of the things that we consume are byproducts of the available technology of the day. So if we were to create the Grammys today, would it be on broadcast television? Would it be funded the way that it is? Probably not, right? So we're busy looking at all these different spaces. We experimented last year with Roblox. We plan to redouble that. I mean, it was staggering for me that for just effectively having a couple of artist meet and greets and a show and a small concert that we did on Roblox, we got almost 3 million people, which is about a third of the total aggregate audience that we got on broadcast television for the show. Or when we put out clips of the show through on Facebook streams, we got 130 million views compared to the 9.5 million views we got on broadcast TV. So this is just the beginning of a journey. I have no idea where it's going to take us, but if I did, why embark on the journey to begin with? So I want to encourage anybody that's listening to this to begin to experiment and dabble into it, because this is the future. And similar to the way that we couldn't predict in the early 90s where the internet would take us, I don't think anybody would have predicted Netflix or Uber or Binance, for that matter. We have no idea where this is going.
I mean, it's all absolutely critical for many industries to evolve into Web3, and it's just so encouraging to hear your take and your thoughts on where the music industry is going, and more than that, it's so important for people to hear from people like yourself on the vision ahead and the road ahead, because it is about education at this point, and so many people are going into it for the first time and just understanding that it's not just a crypto asset, it's a whole world of innovation. Panos, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks so much.